Welcome back to CBS This Morning, Saturday. As the effects of climate change continue to accelerate, the UN says the strongest lever we have to reduce global warming is to curb the emissions of the greenhouse gas methane. But methane emissions continue to accelerate. CBS News meteorologist and climate specialist Jeff Berardelli is back with more now on a game-changing solution to slow methane. Jeff?
Good morning again. Globally, methane is responsible for 30% of global warming. And of that, livestock such as cattle account for a very big chunk, about 1/3 of all methane emissions. But a solution may be right over the horizon. We traveled to Prince Edward Island, Canada, to meet a man whose unlikely discovery has the potential to change the world.
The miracle cure for climate change is right there in that tub.
Nature. Yeah. Nature has a solution.
Yes, yeah, always. To every problem. Just we're not paying enough attention to it.
From the moment you meet Joe Dorgan, it's clear he's quite the character.
There's more education in a turnip than there is in me. I got no education.
Often self-deprecating for a smile, Dorgan is being modest. He's no average Joe. In fact, he stumbled upon what is nothing short of a climate miracle, the seeds of which were planted through 5 generations of family farming along the shores of Prince Edward Island, Canada. Back then, farmers harvested seaweed for feed and fertilizer.
This here stuff here, prime stuff. This is what's used. We don't take nothing out of it. We don't put nothing into it. This is the cure for everything that ails anything or anybody.
While beachgoers may consider seaweed a nuisance, Dorgan knew from experience it was teeming with potential. So he sent samples of it to Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia to test for organic certification. Turns out the high uptake of natural vitamins and minerals in seaweed drove up reproduction and milk production in cows. Joe knew instinctively that seaweed would be healthy for cows, but what came next was a big surprise. Research revealed an unintended consequence. Seaweed made cows less gassy.
They found out that feeding this to the cattle would reduce the greenhouse gases by as high as 40%.
Ruminants like gassy cows have been labeled climate villains, but not because of what comes out the back. You see, cows have a very unique way of digesting roughage, requiring extra digestion and boosting burps. Those burps emit methane, a heat-trapping greenhouse gas that's 80 times more potent than carbon dioxide. In a year, a cow emits as much greenhouse gas as a small car. So with animal numbers now skyrocketing to help feed a growing human population, livestock accounts for 15% of global emissions. That's the challenge that motivated scientist Rob Kinley, who worked with Joe on his organic certification 15 years ago, to find a seaweed species with even more methane-reducing power.
We started testing seaweeds from coastal Australia, and it wasn't long before the Asparagopsis species showed up, and it showed up in a big way. So big that we didn't even believe what we were seeing. It took multiple runs of testing this before we believed what we were seeing, which was we couldn't find methane anymore.
You heard right. Kinley's research showed Asparagopsis, a common type of red seaweed, has the potential to virtually eliminate methane emissions from livestock. But there are some obstacles to overcome. First, it's not easy to harvest it from the ocean, so scientists are experimenting with farming it. Kinley's team, along with others like Josh Goldman, are getting much closer to perfecting the techniques.
The way that it shifts the ruminant function in the cow also makes the animal more energy efficient.
Goldman is encouraged by the seaweed's versatility. He says cultivation only takes about 90 days, allowing for multiple cycles per year, and it can be grown by aquaculture operations almost anywhere, as long as the climate is suitable. Is there any way to do it for the 1.5 billion cows on Earth? I mean, that's a big lift, isn't it?
There are a lot of mouths to feed, but the good news is we only need to feed those cows 0.2% of their daily ration.
Still, there's the challenge of encouraging cow owners to use the seaweed supplement. For that, Goldman says there's incentive. That's because adding seaweed to a cow's diet means they consume less food. And he says dairy farmers and cattle ranchers will likely be able to cash in. selling carbon credits for the emissions they reduce. If we were able to eliminate almost all methane from almost all cows on Earth, how big of an impact would that have?
It would have a tremendous impact, roughly equivalent to eliminating all the emissions from the US or the equivalent of taking every car off the road globally.
That's a long way off, but then again, Kinley's work has come a long way since his initial discovery 15 years ago.
This will be a much bigger story even 12 months, 18 months from now.
You seem very optimistic.
I am optimistic.
As for Dorgan, he's nearly retired, but his work with seaweed continues. So you didn't set out to be a climate hero?
No, never crossed my mind. I want to be who I am.
An everyday guy whose impact on the planet is anything but ordinary. Now, while there is lots of optimism for this seaweed solution, critics say it hasn't been tested at scale yet. And while it's clear that methane reduction from seaweed is effective in the short term, there is some fear that its effects may diminish over time as the cow's digestive systems adapt. But the bottom line here is this one type of seaweed can reduce methane emissions from cows by over 90%. Now the challenge is getting it to all those cows.
That's huge.
And it's a very small amount of the seaweed in their food.
It's like sprinkling salt, so 0.2% of the feed would have to be seaweed. So it's just like sprinkling salt on top of food.
But not all seaweed is equal.
Right, and this particular type, Aspergopsis, say that 10 times quick, is the most potent one. But it has to be grown by aquaculture all over the world. The good news is it can be grown in almost any climate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Something worth trying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Regardless, gonna take time.
We're hoping.
Really, really interesting. Thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.